Uh, Hello? Hi, it's me, Fond. I've made a blunder. Well, funny thing is, I actually made this blunder maybe like 4 months ago, 5 months ago. I don't really know, it's been a while. My point is, this is episode 16 of the Throne of Rihdar. And well, there's no footage of said episode. So I guess I'm going to do a small recap, kind of in the form of a video diary, even though I'm not really doing those anymore. Mostly just as well, who knows. Anyway, so please bear with me as I try to recall all that's happened. I believe last time we left, the players... Actually, hold on. I know exactly what happened. Last time we left, the players finally left Maplewood. They were on the road. After fighting a bunch of gnolls, they ran into the magic hotline led by Wilbur Watkins, who was in fact the one they'd met earlier in the Nero Coliseum when they were doing the fighting and the whole accident happened with Kira in the infirmary. That whole tragedy. And Newt decides to touch the bird. The Raven of Ghostly Red. That's what I call it. The players don't know that. That's what it's called. Upon touching it, this is where we get into our current session. Things go haywire. The magic goes off. And from the magic, firstly, Wilbur Watkins, realizing there's a problem, tries to contain it using a couple magic items. Mostly the Prison of Joel, which was a magical force item to try and contain him, which worked temporarily. But then exploding from this magical prism were a bunch of metallic... Well, it was a bunch of fog, and then a bunch of metallic branches, almost like, as they pierced through everyone. All they heard was screams, and as things vanished and this fog took over, which some of the players realized what was going on. Then, with this, they kind of couldn't see or hear anyone anymore as this fog rolled through. Also, keep in mind, for this session, we only had 3 of our 5 players. Kira wasn't actually there, and Newt the player of Newt was gone as well, but it didn't quite matter for the situation. And this was never actually a plan to happen with. This all kind of came down to the fact that we were going to be missing Newt, so we had a couple sessions to play around with, which ended up being really good. Anyway, they come to, and they find themselves all in front of a rock. On the rock are certain titles. I don't think it's important enough to tell you the actual titles, but each of the titles kind of hinted at or referred to one or the other of the players. And then they saw in the middle was this rusted metallic tree. Atop of it, they heard these weird mimicking cries, which were ravens, normal ravens. They weren't different colors or anything. And tied to the tree was Newt. And from these rocks, basically these bone chains went out, wrapped around the tree, and inside these chains was Newt. And these other players don't realize right now, but I did have a small little side session with Newt himself for what was going on after this. But that's irrelevant, mostly. There, they get up, they convene, and they're about to go talk to him, and they see a man standing there. He has this really white hair, and as he turns around, he has this stained blood. His clothes are stained with blood that looks like they've been there forever. It's not fresh blood or anything like that. And he looks really old, almost. He looks young, but the way he stands, he seems worn out, exhausted. He has this white hair. His eyes are the most notable thing about him. As he turns around and they realize his eyes are almost like that of a dead fish. They're there, but they're not seeing properly. And after talking to him, they learn a lot of information about what's going on. He calls this place the Bramble, and that metallic tree they're looking at is called Devatas, the tree of rust, or the rusted tree. And they also realize at this point that that tree looks very similar to what happened when they first got their muzzles. So they kind of get this correlation that maybe they're inside their muzzles, the collars around their neck. Maybe something happened where the unstable magic of the bird conflicted with the magic of the collars, and it kind of fought, and now they're here. And they quickly realize the way this nameless man, they never give him a name, and he doesn't remember his name either when they asked. They kind of realize that he's really old in the sense of he's been stuck here. He says he can't die. He's been here forever. And the last thing he remembers was from the end of the fourth epoch, before the gods left. The last thing he remembers is the end of the war. Sinful's Skort, or I think Sin's, the Sin, I can't remember the name of the war. It's not important right now. More or less, there was some information drop, some lore dump from him to them. And they kind of realized that, oh, he's here from then. And they kind of talk for a while, and he warns them not to mess Devtos, the tree that's super fast. It was the last tree alive during the war, and it managed to basically suck up all the blood of the epic beast, the gods and their avatars, and it learned how to walk, more or less, and it's the fastest thing he's ever seen, as it went from place to place just killing everyone else. Until finally they managed to seal it here. But his memories are wacky, he doesn't know for sure. But of course, the players realize that they need to get out of here. So he taunts them and says, you can get out of here, but you need to go to Mirror's Edge. You need to get out of the Bramble, which is connected to the spirit world, he says, by looking at yourself and going through the mirror that you came in here in. So he basically points them in a direction, say, go that way. If you keep walking straight, you'll get to it. And before they leave, Damu plays them a nice little lullaby. And he seems to, they have a bit of a humanizing moment. And as the four of them leave, they decide to leave Newt there. They did actually try to help Newt. Newt seemed to have been being siphoned by the tree, and his blood was going up into these little heart fruits that were beating, and the crows were there waiting at the heart fruits. So they decided to kill the crows, and they ended up killing 7 of the crows in hopes that it would stop them from eating it or something. But whenever they killed the crow, when the crow fell or the raven fell, so with it did the heart fruit, because it seemed like it was attached by like an invisible string or something. So every time they did that, a heart fruit fell, until eventually they realized, as they were synchronizing their tats, they realized they were running out of fruit, and they noticed that Newt was getting worse and worse as they were doing this. And a nice investigation check or an arcana check from Damu made him realize that this was more of like losing his life force. They were basically doing soul damage to him. And as they were leaving, oh, my cat's here. Lucy, come here. Lucy, don't miss. Lucy, I'm trying to record. Come here. Sorry. But as they were leaving, this nameless man warned them as well to be careful that the soul mites would be attracted to them and they would chase after them. And the soul mites are just these creatures attracted to any living souls, and they would be chasing after them. And they kind of traveled for a while. They went through, traveling through this weird misty world, decayed and broken. And they went through this battlefield where they saw, I guess, a soul or a creature, they weren't really sure, but it was stuck in this weird little flesh puddle, half its body, its torso, and its arms hanging out. And it was almost like it was trying to crawl, but couldn't anywhere. And it begged them to kill him. It said, please kill me, but they decided this was too dangerous, too sketchy, they don't want to risk it. But Hawkins, as he walked past, he did drop him a scimitar, and as they were leaving, they watched as he kind of stabbed the scimitar into his own neck and died. But then he ended up coming back before they could get out of earshot, and he started crying and going mad, realizing that he could never die, and he'd always be stuck there in that puddle. And they kept going, until eventually they they start elevating up. They follow this rock ridge that goes up. It turns into almost like a rock bridge, and it goes above the clouds. And it's almost like they looked at the sky above the clouds. It looks like it's painted tablets of just colors. And it's very beautiful. But up ahead they hear fighting, and they find a very tattered remnant of the magic hotline. They see, I believe it was four, I think. Yes, they see 4 of the Magic Hotline members and Wilbur Watkins. The 4 are in the front, and they're holding back using an invisible wall just a swarm of what they would later realize are soul mites. As these humanoid-looking creatures, little robotic-looking, and they have hollowed eyes, and their mouth is agape, and they're just and they throw themselves at this wall like zombies. They're holding them back barely, but there's probably 100 or 2 of them there. Then a fight ensues, and in this fight, the group actually learns how to chain casting with some of the other mages. And a rough explanation of what chain casting is very simply, when someone's casting a spell, you can jump in and attempt to help them, and that would, by technical terms, make the DC a little higher to beat, or make it do a little more damage, or something similar. So they did that, and it was a rough fight, but there's no point in describing all the details. Let's keep it simple. They ended up winning the fight at the cost of one of the Magic Hotline members falling off the edge. And they're also warned that if you die here in the Bramble, your soul dies in life and you become a corrupted soul. So they also know not to die. Out of this fight, they end up, which this is really the most unfortunate part of all this. I believe in the next video you may catch a glimpse of him, but I'm not 100% sure. But then crawling up off the rock is this weird looking creature. His name's Viola, and he offers them to play a game of questions. If he asks you a question, you can answer, but if you ask a question, you get to ask one back. So more or less, you can ask a question and ask one back. And firstly, one of the Magic Hotline members starts talking to him and basically says he doesn't want none of his nonsense. And he kind of accidentally walks into asking him a question, like, who are you? And so he answered Viola. And so that means, he's like, but it's my turn to ask you a question. So then he asks him a question. And I believe he asked something like, what's your favorite color of underwear or something like really weird. And the Magic Hotline member refused to answer. And then it was revealed through this that if you don't answer, or if you lie and he knows you're lying, or something similar, or if it's not a truthful answer, or if you refuse to answer, he can give you one command. And so he commands him, I do not like people who do not answer, or those who lie. You, little birdie, need to learn how to fly. And then with that, he commanded him to walk off the edge, and he fell through the clouds, screaming. Which really riled up a lot of the Magic Hotline members. They just watched when their friends die. But then after this, even though in the risk, he managed to... A lot of the players there didn't want to engage, but in the end, Kit, Hawkins, and Damu ended up engaging with him. And actually, well, I didn't think this character through very much, and they ended up getting one up on him. But they asked, there's no point going through all the questions, nor do I remember them all, but they more or less did some riddles with him. And then at the very end, the last thing he offers is, if you can answer this question, what was it? Oh yes, I think he said, if you can answer this question, I'll grant you any wish. And the question was, how many days does your friend on the tree have to live? And Hawkins managed to guess it right, maybe using a little bit of meta, but it was perfectly fair, because every time they broke a heart fruit, it took away one maximum hit point of Newt, and every day he would lose one. And since they hit him 7 times, that means he had 8 HP left, so that means he would only live for 8 days. So Hawkins answers 8 days, and of course he was right, so he offered him a wish, and Hawkins attempted to get the collars removed from them, but there the session ended. And you see in the next session that it's very clear that that wish was not going to come easily. And this was a very rough recap, but I hope it gives a little bit of answers. And whenever you watch the next episode, you'd understand a little bit better of what's going on. But this is very rough, so you can kind of get a brief understanding of what I just forgot to save the video, like a bozo. But yep, sorry about that. I hope this worked, kind of.